Yo, 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 what is going on, guys? Oh, man, I think that my mic is a little bit too loud. Oh, man, I was overmodulating a little bit. I apologize about that. I just saw that the red was coming on, and I was like, oh, no. But, so, look, I have a special guest on with me tonight. Okay, this is my man. I've known him for such a long time. He's been really killing it with Total Sports Live. He has a podcast that he does every week on there. He used to write for the Delaware Bluecoats. Man, like this guy and I go way back, and he has been really putting out some awesome content out there. And I had to get him on, and I'm so happy that we were finally able to make this happen. And it's my man, Harrison Brown. Harrison, what's up? How you doing?
What's going on, Jason? Appreciate you having me on, man. It's a pleasure to be on here with you. I'll reciprocate that. You've been killing it with the content lately. Love all the stuff you got going on, and you're gonna have some great streams these next few days, man. Sixers first win of the series, big win against the Boston
Huge.
Celtics. We got a lot to get into tonight. This is a huge momentum, big time win for the Sixers. So I'm interested to hear what you got to say tonight.
Yeah, man. I mean, over the past like couple of days, as fun as I've been having like calling Phillies games, I'm thinking to myself like, Sixers season is not over yet, is it? Because they had like a 9 day like hiatus, not hiatus, but like there were 9 days off, and I'm like, as great as baseball is, like I want to finish out the Sixers season. Like, I need Sixers basketball like in my life right now.
Listen, we're recording here in the late hours. It's May 2nd, okay? Baseball season has a long road ahead of it. We
It
are far
does.
from the All-Star break.
Oh my
You know,
gosh.
we're talking NBA basketball. These playoffs have been great overall, Sixers aside, but when you're
Yeah.
looking at the Sixers in particular, this is crunch time. They haven't been to the Eastern Conference Finals with this group of players. Joel Embiid hasn't been there yet. Doc Rivers on the Sixers hasn't been there yet. So this
Yep.
is a really important season. It feels like they have a window right now where they could, the NBA is relatively open.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the playoffs overall have just been so much fun to watch. I'm like watching Sacramento and Golden State go into seven
Yup.
games. After game two, everybody's like, "Oh, Sacramento hasn't." I'm like, "No, like this is going 7 games,"
You
and
can't
uh,
you can't count those guys from the Bay out.
no, you can't. And
Mm-mm.
and in all honesty, like similar playing styles, like they both go very fast paced. And the only reason why Golden State was able to win that series was because of the physicality and because of just out rebounding and all that sort of stuff. But look, we can talk about the NBA all we want. You and I could talk for days about basketball. But the overall, the playoffs really have been. I don't think that the playoffs as a whole have been this good since a very long time.
They've been fantastic. Yeah, they really have. Top to bottom, all
Gosh.
the series have been a lot of fun. How about Phoenix and LA? The KD
Miami and
versus Russ.
Milwaukee.
Exactly right. Like you said, we could go all night here talking about all these other series. We're
Oh
here
my
to talk
gosh.
Sixers and Celtics, which is
Yeah.
a rivalry series. The Celtics got the better of the Sixers a few years ago. I'm not sure if everybody remembers back in the bubble. Celtics got the better of the Sixers, so this is a fun one.
Oh no. I mean, game one tonight that got me fired up. I was really nervous coming into this game because I even said that I was fine with Joel Embiid like being out. I was thinking to myself like a couple of weeks ago when the injury happened, like the Brooklyn Nets really just like their whole goal was just to take him out, and they should really be fine for it. I feel like, and like nobody is even talking about it now. They just even according to Doc Rivers' words, like they just threw the entire kitchen sink at him, but it wasn't just double teaming him. It was literally like having him land on his back, like pushing him over. And like Nick Claxton acting like he's an all-star out there. Like I'm so happy that we're done with that series and that we've just moved on to better things because this team deserves to be where they are right now. I I feel like when you just take a look at this team from top to bottom, this is the most support that Joel Embiid has ever had
I agree.
in his entire career. And the fact that you were able to take game one at the Garden in Boston in that hostile environment where you lost in the second round a couple of years ago when Joel Embiid made his first playoff appearance with Ben Simmons. Then the bubble thing happened. And this is just a team that has just really been like that's always had an edge over Philly. And this was just so rewarding to see them take this game, not just win it at the Garden, but win it without Embiid. And I want to hear your thoughts about like what first just comes to your mind.
Like you said, to win game one at the Garden without Embiid is huge. I think first things first, and this is something we're going to get into. How about the performance from James Harden tonight? 45 points, tied his career playoff high. That's the
Yes,
type of performance you're looking for. I was listening to the post-game press conference. He kind of mentioned that his role with the Sixers is to be the facilitator to Joel Embiid. His role is to get him the ball in pick and roll situations, and we know the type of player Joel Embiid is. Really just get the ball into Joel Embiid's hands and let him go to work from there. But I think we can't discredit Harden's ability as a scorer. And we saw it tonight on display. This is still a guy who just a few years ago, I mean, and still to this day could be considered one of the top players in the NBA. But
I
you look
agree.
back a few years ago, certainly one of the best scorers in the NBA. A pure scorer, always has had that natural left-handed shot that's really always been money. So to see him go out tonight, really put that on display. Listen, I think that's going to help his pockets in the next contract negotiation. I think that's going to be a really good, go back and refer to game one against the Celtics when you're wondering how much money should James Harden get. Is James Harden still that type of player that he always was?
Yep.
45 points against one of the better teams in basketball. You know what I mean? You can kind of
Yeah.
refer to that. And another thing that came to my mind, you were mentioning kind of the Celtics and Sixers, and the Celtics certainly have had the edge on the Sixers in recent years, not just on the court. Let's go back to the draft. The Celtics'
Right.
best player right now, Jason Tatum, easily could have been a Sixer. You want to
Markel
poke and pry?
Fultz.
There you go. Exactly. So this is not just a rivalry on the court. This is one of the biggest rivalries in basketball, I'd argue. Philly and Boston, a great
Yep.
rivalry. You really don't see it much in the other sports. The Phillies and Red Sox aren't particularly rivals. Flyers and Bruins, sure, they've had their fair share of battles, but this one right
Oh
here,
yeah.
Eagles, New England, is a treat when it happens, but two different conferences. But Sixers and Celtics is really the Philly versus Boston. That's the pinnacle, in my opinion, of Philly versus Boston.
Yeah, and it's funny because not even in the NBA, like, do you really have a lot of like team rivalries right now? Like, you can still say, I guess, like all time wise, like Lakers and Boston because
Right.
of Kobe and Paul Pierce and all those guys, and obviously before that too, like you had the Will Chamberlain era and all
Right.
that sort of stuff. But I feel like that the whole Philly Boston rivalry has been so. I mean, it started like since the beginning of the NBA. Like you go back to Bill Russell and Will Chamberlain, and it's funny because I got a picture from or I got like a little screenshot from somebody, and it said and he found like this information and it said I don't know like where it was from, but Philly and Boston have met 21 times in the postseason, and the
Wow.
Celtics have actually won 14 of those series. The
Feels
last
like in recent
time,
years.
the last time that the Sixers won was the 1982 Eastern Conference Finals.
Wow.
That was the last time that the Sixers beat the Celtics in the
It,
playoffs.
it certainly feels like it in recent years. There's a lot of memories
Gosh.
of the Celtics advancing to that Eastern Conference Finals and then even the finals, while the Sixers, unfortunately, they haven't been able to make it past this second round. It's a great start tonight. I'd love to see them go out and close and finish. This wouldn't just be, rewarding in terms of the Sixers getting past the Celtics. How about the Sixers making the Eastern Conference Finals? There have been so many different
Yep.
opportunities, even going back to the
Correct.
Brett Brown era. The Raptors,
Yep.
obviously, the Hawks, the
Yep.
year after that, how disappointing that series was going to
It was
seven.
terrible.
The Ben Simmons moment. So there's just been so many infamous moments in this round in particular, this second round
Yep.
here, where the Sixers have just had a really tough break of it, or maybe not even a tough break of it, just gotten outplayed and beat. So this is a really important series, I think, for the Sixers organization as a whole on multiple levels. Obviously, it's a playoff series; it's going to be an important series, but I feel like this one just has a little more meaning to it.
I think that that's actually the perfect segue because year in and year out, the whole theme or one of the main themes that's been going on with the Sixers team over the last couple of years is the big man can't stay healthy. And there's always something. He had an orbital eye fracture like last year, right? The knee problems, right? Like the stomach bug a couple of years ago, like when he was playing against Toronto. Like all these things, like he's just always had something. And now we've been hearing a lot of reports of like what has been reported. Some people say it's like a meniscus tear from the national media. Some people have been saying it's a grade 1 sprain, in his knee and that type of a thing. regardless of what it is, okay, they were without him tonight, and I don't think anybody expected them, or not a lot of people expected them to win this game the way that they did. And I just thought that that was just such a great morale boost for the team. It wasn't just a moral victory. Like, this was a huge win. And I think that that's like a really good segue to just like, start off the conversation in regards to this team, because you're missing your heart and soul of this team in Joel Embiid, and yet we still have a guy in James Harden who turned back the clock and showed up with his Houston self, and the whole like the whole casino thing, like I guess it was a good thing for him because, like he had to get his mind off of things, but he was going to the gym, he was working on the mid-range jumper, and he even said, like on Devon Givens even reported that he had to attack more. Like that was the one thing that he said, and he had to be more assertive. And I thought that he did such an incredible job at that tonight.
Assertive is a great way to put it. That's the way he played. He was the lead guy. He was who the offense ran through. And normally he isn't. Normally Joel Embiid is who the offense runs through with his dominance down low, his ability to stretch the floor with his shooting. Joel Embiid's a unique player. Him and James Harden have really teamed up well, and that was the idea from the jump. That was the idea
Yeah,
when they traded for Harden from Brooklyn, was to put those two together, to really let them work in the pick and roll, work in different ways together. It's a really nice balance for your team, on both sides of the court. Really, so and you mentioned Joel's injury history. Listen, from the day Joel became a Sixer, there's been an injury history. He came in
foot.
here injured from Kansas in 2013,
Yep,
missed that first season, the first two seasons early in his career, and then came out, became this dominant player, became this MVP candidate, should win the MVP this year. It's a part of his game. It's a part of a 7-footer who's that unique, that athletic, can do so many different things. Injuries are going to be a part of his game. It just has to be kind of factored in. I think they've done relatively, especially in the past few years, a good job of managing his workload. We've seen that across the NBA, not just with Joel Embiid, but we're talking about the Sixers in particular here. Joel Embiid's workload. I think Doc Rivers, Daryl Morey, that group has done a good job managing him. Now, listen, you can't really game manage and load manage a player in the
for
playoffs.
sure.
And you mentioned it, Jason. The Nets threw the kitchen sink at Joel Embiid, right?
They did.
Claxton was coming after him. Them as a team, they were coming after him. They didn't have much. Crazy year for the Nets. You lose Steve Nash, your head coach. They let go of him early in the year. Kevin
Yep.
Durant, Kyrie Irving, and Ben Simmons. You start the year with those three in the playoff series against the Sixers. They have none of them. Mikal Bridges, the Philly native, was by far their best player. Well, Cam Johnson, was their best player, but Mikal Bridges had a really good series. So,
Yep.
they had to figure out any way they could to get after the Sixers, and attacking Joel Embiid was the way to do it. You hope that Joel Embiid can get back on the court. Jason, you'll probably know better than me his timetable in terms of the recovery. You hope that he can get back on the court either in this series, or if some way the Sixers pull it out and they keep this thing going. James Harden
Yep.
keeps playing well. They get past this series. You hope he's back early in the conference final, but it's certainly a loss. As big a fan as we are of Paul Reed, and I'm sure we'll talk about him, there's a downgrade there's certainly going to be, what I mean, a lack that you're missing with Joel Embiid out. So,
For
I
sure.
think especially as he gets older, the injuries are going to continue to be a part of Joel Embiid's game. I think the value that he brings you when he's on the court is worth it, that you're going to put up with that and figure out a way to manage that workload. And then injuries can happen to any player anytime. There's no way to fully prevent or predict an injury, but I think the Sixers have done a pretty good job.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, like, let's get into Paul Reed, because I think that that's a really good transition into my next point that I wanted to make, because you talked about Joel Embiid, and even on the defensive side of the ball, we all know that he is a top five like defensive player. He's arguably the best rim protector in the NBA, and he can also guard the perimeter if he really wanted to. He can actually stay on guards, and the fact that he could just do that, it just boggles my mind that he can do that. Like when he has that mindset. But in regards to guarding the perimeter tonight, in the very first quarter, give Joe Mazzulla a lot of credit, because the Boston Celtics were thinking to themselves, okay, if Embiid's not going to play, let's just attack the rim. And the Sixers were not getting back on defense a lot of the time, and because of that, they were giving up so many easy twos. And Paul Reed had a really, really bad first quarter. But then in that second half, there was just I don't know like what happened in that locker room or whatever, but this dude was like literally crashing the glass, doing everything that he was doing in that first round against Brooklyn, and he was making some really good plays. And that doesn't even include the foul shots at the end of the game, which were so crucial. Those were the free throws of his life. And when it came down to the wire, he stepped up big time. And I think that he deserves so many flowers because he hasn't been the best foul shooter. And so many people have critiqued his shot. I mean, it doesn't look. I mean, like there's some problems with the form and all that sort of stuff, but I have to give him credit because he played really well down the stretch.
Listen, free throw form aside and anything else that aside, how fantastic has it been to see Paul Reed develop into the player that he's
Oh
become?
yeah.
The Sixers have had a lot of trouble really finding that backup center to Joel Embiid who can complement Joel Embiid. They've tried a bunch of different things. Obviously, the Sixers are facing Al Horford right now, and the Celtics. We can all flash back a few years ago and remember how that went. When he was their
Al
power
Horford
forward,
and
and then that
Josh
back.
Richardson.
Exactly right. And then you look at Andre Drummond before the Harden trade. So they've kind of went a number of different ways trying to figure out, who's the ideal backup center to Joel Embiid. I think Paul Reed fits the mold perfectly. I think what he brings for you, his ability to stretch the floor, has some position versatility, can play that four, is a really good backup, can get on the court in different ways, can cover different types of player, and like you mentioned, a good rim protector. Listen, I think offensively, is it perfect? No, the free throw shots aren't perfect.
No,
He's a big man. Why? Back in the day, people weren't overly critical of big men that couldn't shoot free throws. So
right.
I think Paul Reed really solid game tonight. He's going to be such an important piece to this series. Even if Joel Embiid comes back healthy, you
Is the
have to
backup
assume the
center.
first few, and you have to assume the first few games Joel Embiid will be kind of limited. Even if they say he's 100% and back on the court and good to go, maybe it's
Right.
90, 80. Who knows exactly what it is? But you have to assume at this point in the season, coming off a pretty relatively major injury, big injury for Joel Embiid, Paul Reed should see an increased workload throughout this playoffs, and no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's also really kind of interesting in that sense because like when when PJ Tucker, would be the backup five at times, like sometimes the matchups just like wouldn't necessarily work in a sense, but I really feel like that Paul Reed like giving him playing time right now is awesome because when he wasn't getting playing time last year, Doc Rivers would literally, put him in the jailhouse, as I like to call it. He had the whole like we don't want to go on like a B-ball Paul tour or a Paul Reed tour, like that whole thing. But when you're playing him more minutes, he's not fouling as much as he used to, and I think that I really feel like that he's actually, starting to come out into his own self because Doc has actually played him more and he made the right decision during the season. And say what you want about like his coaching over the years past, him blowing 3-1 leads and all that sort of stuff. What really matters is that the lineups have looked really well and he's staggering a lot of people's minutes and also the play calling has been terrific. And tonight was just another example of how great he was down the stretch. James Harden and that pass by James Harden to Tobias Harris when he was going right to the rim and it was a no look pass. He looked only for like a second to see that Tobias Harris was wide open at the top of the key. But it's just those types of things that I take note of as somebody that just watches these games and calls them at the same time. But like I I just feel like that I feel like that those things just can't go unnoticed. And I was really happy with how Doc Rivers coached this game. I can't complain.
Yeah, listen, Doc Rivers has caught a lot of flack since really early in his Sixers tenure.
Yep.
Since really that first year, people have been on him. And my big question mark is, well, if Doc Rivers isn't going to be the coach, who do you want to hire? Who's
Correct.
this magical hire that has a
Correct.
better resume than Doc Rivers, or will coach this team better, or will be more? The team will respond to a coach better. who is it going to be? Doc Rivers is a future NBA Hall of Famer, an NBA champion, an NBA legend. A lot of these young guys on this Sixers team probably looked up to Doc Rivers when they were young and
Right.
idolized him as a fantastic NBA coach. I think Doc Rivers is the greatest, not the greatest coach ever in NBA history, but a great coach for the Sixers to have as their head coach. When Brett Brown was let go, I was relatively disappointed. I was a fan of Brett Brown. I thought, listen, the COVID year didn't plan out exactly how everyone had hoped, but I thought he was a really good coach. Had been through a lot with the Sixers. I don't think there was a better choice to replace Brett Brown than Doc Rivers. I think that was one of the only ways it was going to be an upgrade. I know
Yeah.
he's received a lot of scrutiny. You mentioned it, the 3-1 leads and things of that nature. We'll see how this series goes. I think if they blow a 3-1 series lead in this one, not knock on wood, hope for not. But
Yeah.
they're the seat will be hot again. But I don't really see a better coach for the Sixers than Doc Rivers. And I also think, like you mentioned, the way the lineups have been flowing have been really good this year in particular compared to years past. I think part of that is because him and Daryl Morey have had a few years to build this now. They've been
Correct.
here for a few years together. They've kind of been able to sit in those war rooms, go over different things, kind of what the philosophies are, what Doc's philosophies are, what fits for him on the court, kind of meshing that with what Daryl Morey has done historically. I think it's worked out really well. And I think you've seen it in some of the players they brought in. Morey had a relationship with James Harden.
Yep.
They really went after James Harden last year. They really pursued James Harden to try to get him in. It seems like that was the type of guy where, like I mentioned earlier, how he kind of facilitated for Joel Embiid. Morey and Doc Rivers probably got on that same page. Like, if we had a guy like James Harden who could facilitate for Embiid. So I think that's part of it. And I think that's top to bottom. Obviously, those are the two top players, but you look at this team 1 through 13, I think they all really complement each other well and complement what Doc wants to do basketball wise.
Yeah, and like, I, I I mean, like, let's talk about Tyrese Maxey. Being one of those guys because if it weren't for COVID, this dude like would have never slid down to 21 because they would have played in the March Madness tournament in Kentucky, and I think that he really like would have shined, and he wouldn't have went to the Sixers. And I'm happy that the Sixers have him. Like, don't get me wrong, because I love the kid. He actually I didn't realize this until like a year ago, but like he actually like lived in Voorhees,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
really funny. And like
Crazy,
I
right?
like I know like where the house is, but no, he's been. I thought that tonight that he had a really good game, even though the shots weren't falling in the beginning. He still kept shooting the basketball, and that's something that we really wanted him to do tonight, especially without Embiid there. We said that James Harden, Tyrese Maxey, and Tobias Harris are gonna all have to take more shots, and he. It seemed like it seemed like in years past or like in games past, like where when he would keep shooting the ball, he wouldn't necessarily he would stop shooting, like if his shots weren't falling. And tonight, I thought he was really aggressive. He was going to the rim. He was finishing with the layups. He's like one of the best finishers, I believe, in the NBA. Maybe not as great as Kyrie Irving is, because I think Irving is the best, but he's up there. But how do you think that he did tonight? And do you see him, continuing to do this throughout the rest of the series?
I think, like you said, Maxi kind of had to be aggressive and continue to be aggressive, even if things weren't clicking early. I think he kind of found his way as the game went on. And, with Joel out, obviously Harden was kind of who the offense ran through, but Tyrese Maxey is a crucial, crucial part to this Sixers offense. I think his development, like I mentioned for Paul Reed, but Tyrese Maxey to a whole different level. His development for the Sixers offense has really been a game changer. They always lacked that guard who could shoot the ball and really handle the ball too and kind of orchestrate things. And that's what Maxi has brought for them. I think, in a way, obviously they're not a 1-for-1 player comp, and they don't do the same type of things. But you look at what Damian Lillard brings to the Portland
Correct.
Trailblazers, and what people were hoping, in theory, if the
Yep.
Sixers could go out and trade for Dame, that was the big piece. Can we go get Dame? Can we trade for Dame for years? Dame has stayed loyal to Portland, stayed there. Tyrese Maxey has become what they were looking for with
Yep.
Damian Lillard, a guard who can shoot, a guard who commands a lot of attention, a guard who can drive, a guard who's physical, real shifty, can make moves, can make people miss. I'm a big fan of Tyrese Maxey. I think listen, the development he's had for the Sixers, if he can continue on, because this is still a relatively young player. Maxey's early on in his NBA career. I think there's still an even higher ceiling for Maxey. I don't think he's
Sky's
reached
the
his peak
limit.
yet. Exactly. So, and pairing him with Joel Embiid and Harden for right now, eventually it'll be someone else. But the idea of having Maxey and Embiid, in theory, that can kind of be what you have right now with Harden and Embiid, how they kind of work together super well. We've seen it with Maxey and Embiid, and I think in future years, Harden eventually is not going to be here money wise, age wise. It'll get emphasized. It'll get enhanced, that Maxey and Embiid relationship. So solid night tonight. Definitely, if Maxey wound up being the guy with a 40-point performance in this series, wouldn't surprise me at all. I think at some point that could be the case. Maybe Harden's in that 20-point range, similar to what we saw tonight. Maxey have.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised about that either. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about too, in regards to the starters, is Tobias Harris too, because like when you look at the three-headed snake, you knew that coming into this series, that those three, if Joel's not there, would be like um the like those guys were gonna have to be the X factor. And I thought Tobias Harris tonight actually not only played really well on the defensive side, but he was getting rebounds and he was also, catching and shooting as well. And there were a couple of moments where he actually got himself into a rhythm. DeAnthony Melton as well was incredible in the first half, with the 5 threes that he made, that kept the team afloat. But sticking to Tobias Harris, this is a guy that has really had to adjust to so many different types of roles. Forget about the money, forget about the contracts, right? This dude has had to adapt his game so many times, and we saw a couple of years ago that he was that Robin to Joel Embiid. And I really feel like that he, even though like the money is like what it is, his playing style has been so undervalued. And his leadership that he brings like to the locker room, getting in Paul Reed's face, telling them that he has to be more aggressive on the glass and doing like those types of little things, that leaders are supposed to do. That's something that I think is really valuable to the team.
Yeah, Jason, you hit the nail on the head there. Tobias Harris is a fantastic basketball player. Like you said,
Yeah.
I know the money is what it is. It's an expensive price tag. Listen,
Yeah.
it's not coming out of anybody listening's pockets. All right. I get the Sixers are your favorite team and all that, but listen, let the Sixers, let Josh Harris, they can handle all that. They're cutting the checks. All right, don't worry about that. They'll take care of it. It's direct deposit. It's hitting.
Just
You
watch
know,
the product.
Tobias Harris is a fantastic basketball player. There's 30 other NBA teams that would love to have Tobias Harris on their roster. A really talented defender, has some position versatility, can do different things, and like you said, complements Joel Embiid and this offense really well. Has taken on different roles, has had to learn different roles just throughout his career as well. Even if you go back to his days on the LA Clippers, those type of teams, playing different roles, being a different type of guy at different type of times in his career. Super important piece of the Sixers. Another guy who similar to Harden, you don't know how long Tobias Harris will be here. 5 years down the line, I'd be relatively surprised if he was still a Sixer.
Right.
But I think this is someone who Sixers fans, once some time has been removed, once that over $20 million contract isn't on the books anymore, and it's not pressing in that way, and there's some other stars in here, people are going to look back on Tobias Harris with a lot of fond memories, with a lot of positive. He did a lot of good things for the Sixers, a good player for the Sixers, a good Sixer overall.
Yeah.
And just he plays a good brand of basketball. Like I said,
Yeah.
a talented defender, can do different things, offensively, can be that guy who's out on the perimeter shooting, can drive, can post up a little bit. So
Yep.
Tobias Harris, fantastic basketball player, really completes what the Sixers have really well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And then lastly, we have to talk about the bench because this is the deepest bench that I think you and I have seen with the Sixers in quite some time. And I thought that DeAnthony Melton, getting him during the offseason was a huge benefit. And it's funny because that was also a part of the Ben Simmons James Harden trade because
Yeah.
the Nets actually deferred the trade. Not only did they get Ben Simmons, but they deferred that draft pick. They gave it back to the Sixers, and the Sixers then traded that draft pick to get DeAnthony Melton from Memphis. And it was a steal. It was another home run move by Daryl Morey. And I I I love like DeAnthony Melton. Okay, PJ Tucker, I wasn't a big fan of the money early on, but now you see why PJ Tucker is who he is because he is a champion, he's a veteran, he is a dog, he's very scrappy with the way that he plays. And I really thought that tonight, even though he didn't get any points, there were just moments where I could see that PJ Tucker was out there. He was trying to out rebound, Al Horford and Robert Williams, and like trying to crash the glass or even make like a little tip out to somebody or save, diving for loose balls, like those types of things. I really thought that the bench tonight and Jalen McDaniels too, another guy that really stepped up. I just thought that the bench tonight was incredible, and they outplayed Boston's bench overall. But what do you have to say about that? Oh, I think you froze. Uh-oh. Did I freeze? Oh boy. Uh-oh. I think he froze.
How they kind of envision it. So 1 through 13 is a strong group and comes out and can make plays. D'Anthony Melton, I like the way he stretches the floor for the Sixers. I think it was a really nice pickup. They've needed
Up, you're cutting in and out, my guy.
up the rest of the series. Obviously, easier said than done, especially with that talented group the Celtics have defensively. Guys like Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown. But yeah, D'Anthony Melton, great get this offseason. I think Daryl Morey and Doc Rivers will continue to get those type of gets in years to come.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then the last thing I want to ask you, before we wrap things up here, is regardless of whether or not Joel plays the next game, I personally think that because they're up in the series, I don't want to play with fire. I want him, I
Exactly.
want him to be ready to go by Friday. Like I don't want him to play Wednesday. Give him a little bit of extra rest, like all those types of things. Make sure that he gets healthy, but in regards to like the rest of the series, if the Sixers are gonna win and Joel does come back, or if he doesn't come back, what are they gonna have to do in order to outplay Boston throughout the rest of the series?
Yeah, well, if Joel doesn't come back, that's a
It's
big part of
tough.
it. I think what we're going to need to see is a lot more of what we saw tonight, and even more of a polished version tonight because the Celtics were in this game for a while. The Sixers defensively really didn't play great. Both teams
No.
hit a lot of shots. It felt like the Celtics and the Sixers were both draining a lot of threes. So maybe tighten up that perimeter defense. I know you're worried a little bit inside without Joel Embiid. Maybe put a little bit of trust in Paul Reed and PJ Tucker down low that they're going to be able to hold their own. They're going to be able to hang in there with Al Horford and the likes of the Celtics big men. Tighten up on that perimeter a little bit. We know the Celtics have a lot of talented wings, guys like Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart. And then offensively, really, Harden and Maxey. The offense has to continue to run through them. It certainly changed the offense a little bit without Joel Embiid in there. There's a lot of different things that you just can't do without Joel Embiid on the court. So Harden and Maxey have to be those aggressors, guys who are constantly pushing the pace, pushing, you know what I mean, trying to get their shots up and being efficient. We really saw it with Harden tonight. Maxey clean up that efficiency a little bit. I think it's a winnable series for the Sixers either way. Obviously, though, I mean, I don't have to explain to anybody that having Joel Embiid would certainly be a big help for the Sixers.
Absolutely. And obviously, look, before I let you go, okay, I am gonna drop like all your social medias like down below in my description, but make sure I wanted to be sure to just give you the floor and just have you talk to the audience and just let them know like where they can follow you and what you've been up to with Total Sports.
Well, I'm going to flip it on you here, Jay, because I want to give you a shout out and just say how great of a job you've been doing, man.
Thank
And
you.
really just tip my cap to you, bro, because I know going on there and calling these games every night, not everybody understands how much detailed research, how many hours you have to put in, the preparation you have to put in, and the level of professionalism you bring on every call, man. It's been really fun to watch. I always tune in anytime I can. I might throw the national broadcast on mute a little bit, have your broadcast on my phone or on my computer. So anybody that wants to learn more about the Sixers, the Phillies, whatever the case may be, man, check out Jason's stuff. It's been really fantastic on YouTube. Great to see you doing your thing, man. In terms of my stuff, like you said, Total Sports Live, you guys can always check me out there. YouTube, just my name, Harrison Brown Russo. A lot of NFL draft content recently. We just wrapped up the draft. Find out who
Yes.
some of those best, day three prospects are, undrafted free agents.
Yep.
Got all that for you guys. Also on Substack. Again, my name, Harrison Brown Russo. Similar stuff. You can check out all my NFL draft content. Got a lot of baseball content coming out now that the draft is over. So always good stuff, man. Always in the mix, always producing content. But just a real treat to be able to get on here with you, man. One of my good friends, like you said in the beginning, someone that I've known for, such a long time, even
Yep.
before this sports media stuff. So
Yep.
it's always a lot of fun to get on here, talk any type of sports with you, man.
My brother from another mother. I
My
really
guy.
appreciate you coming on here, dude. We have. I am gonna get you on. I am gonna get you on for a Phillies cast.
I'll be there
Yeah,
anytime.
I am gonna get you on for that. All right. I'm gonna wrap things up. But no, dude, thanks so much for coming on here. And guys, don't forget to follow, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe as always. And we'll be back on tomorrow for a Phillies cast tomorrow night. And I will see you guys there. Peace.